But from a very young age, my family had me as music teachers. They had me involved in every kind of, public event, speaking out loud, or, playing in the bell choir at church. And one thing that really resonated with me and what I was thinking about it was one time when I was in grade school, my dad was putting on, he was a music teacher at the grade school. He was putting on, I guess, a grade school show. I don't know what you would call those, but a grade school show. But I had the big part, right? I had the part where he gave me a book, and I had to go down and I had to read this whole big thing out of this book in front of the entire school, and I was in grade school. And I can remember going down there, and I really didn't have any reference point for it because I hadn't done anything like this before. And I got down there, and I went to open up the book in front of all my friends and everybody in grade school, and all at once my hands just started shaking so bad that I couldn't even hold on to the book anymore, right? So I just completely freaked out, and I closed the book, and I tried to remember something about what it was that I was supposed to read, but I just couldn't get anything to come out. And so in a moment of just sheer fear, sheer panic, just helplessness, I turned around and I ran away. I ran off the stage. And as any good performers would do, the show must go on, even if one of us completely falls apart. So the show went on. But you guys remember in grade school those doors that they had that had like the little side glass things right there where you could just kind of peek through and see the side glass? So I can remember being there in grade school, peeking through that little side glass and seeing the show going on and seeing the people out in the crowd and thinking to myself, well, you really need to go back out there again. But I had my hand on that door, and my hand was still shaking, and I just couldn't get myself to open that door. So I just stood there, and I can remember this clear as day. I was probably 3rd or 4th grade, looking out that window, watching the show going on, just wishing that I had the courage and the strength to be able to open that door and go back out there and join the group. But I never did. And that left such a mark on me that 20-some years later, 30 years later, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but 20, 30 years, somewhere around that range, I never in that time frame allowed myself to be put into a position where I would be in front of people speaking or performing, anything like that, just because that experience freaked me out so bad. I never forgot that weakness, that helplessness, that fear that was associated with that I never put myself in that position again, even as an adult, even as a grown man. And so I started a business when I came here to Lynchburg, and I was meeting with my business mentor out in Oklahoma, and he was kind of talking to me, Will, what are you doing in your business? What are you doing to help make things grow? And he said, one of the things that I'm hearing that you're not saying that you really need to do is you need to do public speaking. You need to get out there in front of people and talk about your business so that people will know that you're there. And I didn't even have to respond. He could just see the look on my face of just sheer fear and terror. I didn't even have to explain it to him. And he looked at me and he said, Will, public speaking for you is your kryptonite. And as soon as he said that, he didn't have to go into an in-depth explanation of it. I knew immediately what he was talking about. Public speaking for you, Will, that's your kryptonite. You're helpless to that. And it took me back immediately to growing up and watching some of the Superman movies. Some of you guys may be too small to remember that. Or I'm sorry, yeah, too young to remember that. But I can remember going back and watching those movies, right? So Superman's there. Superman can do anything. He's not afraid of anything. He's basically got unlimited superpowers. Nothing can stop him. And then all at once he'd be in a room and there'd be a bad guy in there, Lex Luthor, whoever, would be in there. And all at once they would pull back this little cover and there it would be. That glowing rock, right? That glowing rock. And all at once, Superman would just fall to his knees, he'd grab his throat, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't do anything. He was just completely helpless to that kryptonite. And as I look back, not only did I have kryptonite that affected me later on in my life, in my business, but as I look back also, I can see where I started to develop kryptonite that began to affect me in my relationship with God as well. And one of those things goes back almost to the exact same time frame as it was when I was in grade school and I had the freak out thing with the performance at school. But I'd gone to a Little League game. And so after the game was over, I wandered over to the opposing team's dugout and I looked up under the bench and somebody had tucked the Playboy magazine up under there. And I was probably still in grade, I know I was in grade school. I don't know exactly what grade I was, but I can remember immediately my heart starting to race. Right? And I had this little red baseball glove playing first base, Little League, Baltimore Orioles. And I remember grabbing that magazine, shoving it in the baseball glove, and just running out there as fast as I could. And I ran home. I got right to the creek below my house, and there was a big hollow tree there. And so I took that magazine, I shoved it up in the big hollow tree, and I remember grabbing rocks and leaves and stuffing it in front of it so that nobody would know it was there. And what I didn't realize at that time when I was in grade school was I was already starting to hide the very thing that 20, 30 years down the road was going to become my kryptonite. I didn't realize that at that time I was already starting to hide the thing that I was going to become powerless to. I didn't realize at the time that the very thing that I was hiding in that tree and putting rocks up so that nobody else would see would be the very thing that I would become a slave to. And every time that I would find myself 20, 30 years down the road, even as a Christ follower, starting to move towards God and my relationship with God, that exact same glowing rock that I stuck in that tree that day and tried to hide from everybody would pop back up again and suddenly derail me. Now, one thing I know about me, guys, is I'm not unique. That is, you guys all have kryptonite too. I don't care where you are in your relationship with God. I don't even care if you have a relationship with God. Maybe some of you in the room today, so maybe some of you in the room today are thinking to yourself, I'm not even a Christ follower, right? I haven't decided to put that stake down the ground. I haven't been able to make that commitment to follow Jesus. But you still have your kryptonite. Maybe for you guys it's an intellectual barrier. Maybe it's, God, I got questions. I'm not going to follow you until you answer these questions. Maybe it's you had a bad experience in a church growing up, and you're thinking, I got a lot of baggage associated with that. God, until this kind of makes sense, all the stuff that I went through in the church growing up, I can't follow you. Maybe it's that you have a fear that you're not going to be able to follow through. Maybe you're looking at your life right now and you're thinking, it's a total wreck. I just don't think I can pull this off. I don't think I can make the changes in my life that are going to be necessary for me to be a Christ follower. And maybe some of you are thinking, I said a prayer when I was 15. I said a prayer when I was 20. I said a prayer when I was 25. Nothing ever really changed in my life. What's going to be different about this time? And for you guys that aren't Christ followers, for you right now, that's your kryptonite. And every time that you feel God tugging on you, pulling you closer towards Him, you start to take a step towards Him, all of a sudden that kryptonite pops up, you get powerless, you get weak, and suddenly you stop moving towards God again. What about you guys who are Christ followers here? Maybe you've been a Christ follower for a week, maybe you've been a Christ follower for a month, maybe you've been a Christ follower for years. What's your kryptonite? What is it? What is that thing that when you get around it, it makes you completely weak and helpless in your relationship towards God? I know from some of you guys it's relationships. Having lots of conversations with you guys here at the table. And a lot of times it's, I've got an ex-girlfriend. She pops up into the picture and I'm derailed. Suddenly I can't, it just completely distracts me from God. Other of you, it's guys that you're running with. It might be a group of people that you're powerless to, that when you get around them, you end up in areas that don't honor God, and suddenly it derails you and away from your relationship from God. Maybe from you guys, it's something that you believe about yourself. Maybe it's something that you believe about God that just flat out isn't true. Maybe you think, I'm not good enough. Maybe you think, God doesn't really love me unconditionally. Maybe I'm kind of looking over my shoulder at God thinking, any minute now He's going to strike me down because I'm not doing good enough. Maybe for some of you guys, it's a habit, right? Pornography is going to be a big one, guys. I know we're going to have lots of guys pop that up today, and that's important, but think outside that as well. Think about other areas of your life. What is a habit that separates you from God? Maybe you've got idols. If I was to ask you right now, what is it in your life that you put before God? Stop and think about that for a minute. Right now, in your life today, what's more important to you than God? It might be your kids. It might be your family. It might be that job that you're trying to get. It might be a new car. I don't know what it is, but that's your kryptonite. Whatever it is, if it's more important to you than God, that's your kryptonite. And for some of you guys, it's just laziness. Sometimes for me, that's the case too. Maybe whenever you feel God moving you into a new, deeper relationship with Him, you just say, I'm too busy.